Okay, we're good? Okay.
No hot mic situations here.
Welcome to the March 24th, 2021 Pelham Board of Education meeting. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sue, could we please have a reiteration of the executive session motions?
Yes, the board met in executive session tonight to discuss the employment history of a particular person or persons.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Board of Education meeting. The spring is always a busy time of year in our schools, and this spring is no different than others. One of the main responsibilities of the board during this season is the review and adoption of a school budget which the community can vote on. There will be 2 more opportunities for further budget discussion and community input of the proposed budget at our meetings on April 7th and 21st. May 5th will be our mandated budget hearing, followed by the school budget vote and school board member election on Tuesday, May 18th. This spring, the main priority before us is the safe return of students to additional in-person learning. We know that Dr. Champ, the administrators, and the task force have been hard at work on reopening plans. Tonight, we will look forward to hearing updates from Dr. Champ and members of the task force on plans for the return to full-time in-person instruction of our elementary students on April 12th, and updates on plans to bring students at the secondary level in for more in-person learning in the coming weeks. Hope is on the horizon. Despite the signs of promise, sadly, we have witnessed 2 violent events since we met last. Our thoughts are with the families of the victims who were killed senselessly in Atlanta and the victims of the shooting this week in Boulder. These 2 events remind us of the importance of the district's strategic work. Through the goal of cultural competency, the district is committing to creating an empathetic, inclusive, and equitable school community that values and encourages respect, voice, and agency for all students. The board is committed to the goal of cultural competence and is keenly focused on moving this work forward to ensure that every student has the tools to succeed and that our district is welcoming for all. We look forward to hearing the recommendations of the Cultural Competency Committee later this school year, which will help build a roadmap for continuing our cultural proficiency work into the future. The event in Boulder underscores the importance of our focus on the whole child. Tonight, we will be accepting a generous donation which will help fund a universal classroom dialectical behavior therapy program, otherwise known as DBT, at the middle school and high school. A program like this will help our students gain strategies to cope with stress, manage difficult emotional situations, and to make good decisions. This, along with many other achieved and future action steps within the whole child strategic goal, aim to nurture all areas of our students' development in addition to their academic development. Among many things, spring is a symbol of new beginnings. With sheetrock, tape, and the tile going into the new Hutchinson School, work underway at Prospect Hill, administrators moving into 314 Pelhamdale this week, and the new fields at Glover bustling with athletes, there are certainly signs of new beginnings around town. So now I'd like to move on to section 3, which is approval of the minutes. Could I please have a consent of 3.1 to 3.3? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Sue. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Vinny. Do I have any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? This brings us to section 4, administrative and committee reports. 4.1 is the superintendent's report.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you for that great report. I have to echo so much of what you said. Throughout this year, even through the most challenging parts of the year when we've been really just nose down, buried in the work, the construction at Hutchinson has just continued to be a bright spot. And it was really exciting this week, as you said, to go over to 314 Pelhamdale and to see that we've already have members of the business office moved over. John Condon is there. Amy Heese is there. Jim will be over there very soon. Most of the office will be over there. So it's just really exciting to see how it's transformed from the home that it was to now a place that's going to house our business office very soon. And after that, of course, Julia and the special education office, as well as our curriculum directors, will be moving into the business office temporarily until the summer, when we all will then move to off-site rental offices. So just really exciting to see the progress and all this planning finally coming to be. And yeah, to walk around Hutchinson and just imagine what it will be in about 6 months from now is just really thrilling.
All those kids who are on the virtual international day too, I thought they're going to get a new school
I
in the fall.
know.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, and that, and that really is what I wanted to highlight too, the excitement that does come from spring, as you said, and the excitement that spring break is within sight now. I know folks are excited about that. It's the first real sense of freedom that I think a lot of folks are feeling, especially as vaccines have been rolling out. But we're really excited as well about what's going on around the district. So just a couple of things. Again, having been so buried in work, it's for so many points throughout the year, it's been really nice to kind of catch a breath and get to see some normal and exciting things. So to be able to go to a volleyball game this week and just see our girls doing what they do best out on the field or on the court, it just felt good to see kids doing what they should be doing in school. So things like that. At the high school, there was another series of affinity parent groups hosted. There's been transition meetings going on at our middle schools and high schools, Ask a Scientist nights at the middle school and high school. And then at our elementary schools, so many great events that are being put forth by our principals and by our PTAs. The Hutchinson International Day, virtual International Day, was just, it was inspiring. I think everyone that I've spoken to who's seen it was just truly moved, touched, and remembered why Hutchinson is so special to our district. And even there was folks on our cultural competence committee who said we should do a district video. So I'm sure there'll be further conversations about that. But it really shows the best of the diversity of our community and our schools and how we value it and why it makes us better. So really exciting times there. And I'm even appreciative to our PTAs who have really taken on some of the charge of our equity audit about building in opportunities for students to connect across schools. So, movie nights, Colonials put out a movie night, but extended the invitation to all students. The International Day video was sent to all schools to be shared. So people really are catching that vision and looking for creative ways with technology to build stronger ties that will bind us across the district. So it's exciting to see that work come to be in such a short amount of time. Tonight, as was mentioned, we are going to be touching on just a few things over the course of the meeting. Certainly, we're continuing with our budget planning. We've presented the initial draft of the budget to the board at our last meeting, and we had our line by line. I'm in the process now of setting up the opportunities to do budget presentations to our PTAs and our community groups. So Jim and I will be going around probably the virtual road show this year, which is a lot fewer miles, a lot fewer dinners out, but that's probably better on the waistline and the budget for both of us. So that's a good thing. But we're looking forward to seeing folks as we come around and talk about the budget and the ongoing work of the district. Our buildings are already working heavily involved in planning schedules and course offerings and programming for next year as well. So this is the time of year where we live in two different worlds in our minds. The school and plans and work that we're doing now, but we're also about 6 months ahead in what we're thinking through. But to the more immediate and to the big topic tonight that we wanted to talk about is our planning for returning to full-time in person next month. And I really have to say I'm so pleased tonight to have a couple community members with us to join in this discussion about the return to full-time in person. I'm so incredibly thankful to have Kristen Burke, who is with us tonight, who is a community member, town councilwoman, and who helped to co-facilitate the task force. It's been a tremendous amount of time over the last month in particular. As folks came to the board and as we as administrators work to figure out how is it that we can take the step forward and bring our kids back to school, we had a lot of common ground in what we wanted to achieve. And thankfully, Kristen was willing to dedicate her time and expertise to helping to facilitate what turned into a very large task force. I think we wound up, if I lost count, I think we wound up over 50 by the end. But it was a great number of folks. We had a lot of teachers, administrators, many of the folks around the circle here, and community members who came with expertise in various areas, be it law, operations, communications, education, mental health, and medical backgrounds, as well as a commitment to the community and really doing what was the best for the children in the community and trying to find that right way to meet as many needs as possible and to get our children back in school safely. So Kristen was a great partner through that. And she really was, the document that is going to be shared tonight would not be in existence without her. So Kristen, thank you. And Aaron Ginsberg is also here with us tonight. They're here to speak on behalf of the committee and share the work that they have done with us over the past month. I could not be more appreciative to them, and I think that you will see as they share, and we'll certainly have an opportunity for questions. This was a really great opportunity for us as a community to explore and explain the challenges that the school district faces in this, but not just end there, but to brainstorm ways towards really achieving something that will be able to balance the wellness needs of our students and staff while maintaining a level of safety for everyone. We recognize, and we've talked about this at the committee, we're never going to eliminate risk from this equation, but we did strike to find the right balance so we can manage those risks that we may be adding by making some shifts. Updated research definitely informed our work and could not have been more perfectly timed as we really tried to answer difficult questions. And the evolving guidance that came from CDC also informed our work as well. I believe that the report that's being presented to you tonight is thorough and reflective of the conversations that occurred with the community and with the committee. I believe there are very solid recommendations that are contained within it, and we're going to be working with the administrative team to finish our analysis of student program choice in these next few days at the secondary level, and then to take those recommendations and implement them. We are still on track at this time to move to full-time in-person instruction on April 12th for all elementary students. Our principals are finalizing again their tallies of who's coming back and who's staying full virtual, and we're in very good shape there. They feel confident we have the space to continue forward on this path. And at the middle school and high school, we're meeting again as soon as tomorrow to again evaluate numbers and see where we stand from a space perspective. And we hope to come back to the board at our meeting right after the break with some decision points around that, decisions on dates and phasing order, and any potential cohort changes that will come. We are anticipating. We did get a lot of feedback. Our principals are still making some final calls. I did want to point out one important thing. As we'd done 2 surveys. One was a general interest survey, and then the other was a commitment survey. And in the first, we asked the question of people, would you prefer hybrid or full-time in person? Was one question in there. And then there was a final question asking if we had to come back in person at 3 feet, would you choose in person or full virtual? And, through the task force and through feedback from the community, there was some question as to, people were concerned that we didn't get real numbers around that, or that the numbers that came in may not have been accurate or reflective of the community. So in the commitment survey, we specifically added a question. We said, yes, we need you to choose full-time in person or full virtual. And this is at the secondary level. But then we said, this, regardless of what you chose above, what we were forced to choose above, if you had your preference, would you prefer to stay in the hybrid or shift to full-time remote? Because we wanted to cross-check that. If people had concerns, we said, you know what, that's fair. We hear that concern. We'll go the extra step to cross-check that. And in looking at the numbers that came back in, it still came back at about 27% that would stay with regular hybrid, and the remainder, the majority, at almost 75%, were moving to full-time in person. So I just want to, to share that, because I think that is an important point, and it's so difficult to know where the majority is, where the loudest voice is, where the quiet majority is. It's always very difficult. It's never a perfect science, but it was worth it to take that extra double check to just to verify that we're on the right path. So with that introduction, I would love to invite Kristen Burke and Aaron Ginsberg up to the mic to share the report and to join the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Champ. As you could tell from the length of the report, I'm a little verbose, so please bear with me. And feel free to ask questions as I go along. I do have a lot to talk about, or you could, ask questions at the end. So I'm going to just start with a little bit of an introduction before I get to the key points of the report. Just want to say how grateful and proud I am to be standing here presenting to you on these findings and recommendations of this task force. This is an amazing group of people. As Dr. Champ mentioned, we have our incredibly dedicated district administrators, our so caring teachers. I was really blown away, and our very passionate community members. And I want to say what our mission was, and it was a common mission, and it was to assess as a collective group through broad discussion and research whether we could bring Pelham children back to school in an environment that is safe and which mirrors as much as possible the educational and co-curricular environment that existed for students prior to the advent of COVID-19, and of course within the bounds of the legal guidelines. So many of us, and I want to do a special shout out to Jackie DeAngelis, who was, I think, the community organizer that kind of brought us all together. But we really do want to extend a great thanks to Dr. Champ for pulling this task force together and moving so expeditiously in this decision. We are really, really grateful. And for all the administrators and teachers, we know for every meeting that we had, you had about 20 meetings. So we do recognize that, and we are very grateful. Next, I want to extend a very special thanks to the science and the medical experts that worked with us, because at the heart of this was what is their expertise in this area, right? And it was really their research and analysis that brought us here to the task force, knowing that we have full confidence that we can bring our children back safely, fully in person to the greatest extent possible. And just to name them, Dr. Breen, Dr. Matthews, Dr. Diamore, Dr. Hebert, really grateful for their work here. And finally, and to end my introduction, I just want to say, weeks ago, we had people, clamoring to come back full-time in person, but they came to this board with really heartfelt messages about the needs that they were, difficulties that they were experiencing. The task force heard that very loud, very clear, and that was certainly one of the reasons why we moved so quickly, to come back full in person. But we also want everybody to know that we're going to continue to be supportive of emotional and well-being of students as they transition back, and certainly our fully virtual students that remain that way. And Erin's going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. So getting to the report, as you can see, it's still in draft form because, we have a plan in place for elementary. We are still finalizing the middle school, high school plan. Of course, things never work out timing-wise as you hope, right? But we are going to get there. We are going to make progress within the coming weeks. I'm really confident. So it's in draft form, and this will be finalized when we have more details on that, okay? So just to start, when we first started this weeks ago, Dr. Champ and I had long conversations about the biggest impediment that we saw was this sort of legal impediment with the New York State guidelines, right? You could have all this scientific guidance and data, but at the end of the day, the district is bound by these New York State guidelines, right? So, and we were very stuck on the requirement of 6 feet distancing, which is still in place, right? Now, remind everybody, the guidelines came out last June, almost a year ago, right? Most of the recommendations and guidelines in the state guidelines are actually excellent and still worthy of continuing. The good hand hygiene, the masking, right? All these things are great, but the 6 foot is really an impediment. And it sort of finally dawned on us. I think it was Assemblywoman Amy Paulin point out that the guidelines say it's 6 foot or physical barriers. And the barriers have to allow for ventilation, and they must be OSHA regulated. So that's great. Here we are. We could check that box. We covered New York State guidelines, right? We've got these barriers. We're continuing to use the barriers. We're going to improve the barriers, right? But our children and our teachers and our staff, we can't check the box, right? They're not something we check a box for. First, paramount among everything is their health and safety. And that is what this task force really focused on every single meeting, is to make sure that this could be a safe return. And so beautifully enough, we did get the CDC guidelines coming in that, confirmed what our experts were saying, that the 3 feet spacing really is safe, with other mitigation steps. First and foremost, the masking, universal masking must continue. There are some limitations. Adults in the schools must remain 6 feet apart. And then in high schools where there's a high rate in the community of COVID, they've got to remain 6 feet. Knock on wood, right now, we've got a very low rate in Westchester in our community, so we should be good. And so I just want to highlight some of the mitigation steps that are really cannot be said enough, that have to continue. We're doing all of this. The school is doing all of this, and some of it is new, and so we want to bring that to your attention. So again, the mask wearing, but we really do urge parents to make sure the mask fits the child. The teachers see over and over again the kids with their masks that are falling. It's really crucial here now that we're going to have some closer spacing. So asking everybody to make sure they have well-fitting masks. The vaccination rates, this is excellent news. The task force is thrilled at the number, and we're talking about possibly 50% of our staff getting vaccinated, fully vaccinated after spring break. Experts say that's fantastic. I think we're shooting for 70%
Yes.
by year's end. They said that would be extraordinary. So that is great news, and we thank those who helped our teachers get those appointments. We got the proper ventilation, the box fans, the windows open. Apparently, the windows have been opened, so people have been doing all these great things, and we're getting some air purifiers in spaces that need them. So that stuff continues. The personal hygiene, I know people are saying now it's not really transmitting by touch, right? These doctors said repeatedly, wash those hands, kids in between transitions, and right before they're about to eat is so crucial. So we got to keep on them and keep on the kids of all grade levels to keep personal hygiene. Next, it's the screening, tracing, metrics, and surveillance. This is also so important, and we're getting rolling with this. But the daily screenings, of course, we're going to continue that. Contact tracing, it's very time sensitive,
Consuming.
time exhaustive. But unfortunately, it can't be delegated outside. It's got to be with Julia and the district. So they're going to keep doing that great work. The surveillance testing, I know there's been a lot of questions about that. These doctors and experts cannot say enough how important the surveillance testing is for tracking and monitoring trends, catching some asymptomatic cases. It'll establish a baseline. Questions about this rapid antigen test. This is the most common test for surveillance testing. It's not as strong as the PCR, but all the advice and experts say it's perfectly good for what we need for surveillance testing. So we're doing that. It's non-invasive, nasal swab, and we just want to keep encouraging the community to really, it's voluntary. We cannot require it, but we really need a broad spectrum of students to keep doing this. We're shooting for 5%. I think we're very close. And the doctors say that's an excellent catch rate. So, and metrics tracking, just also really important, so that we understand that the mitigation strategies are working, right? And of course, we're going to track it versus the positivity rates here and our, surveillance, how our surveillance testing is going, and of course, monitor if we have to go back to hybrid, if we have to shut down. These are things we would have to consider. So how important that is, and we want it to be very transparent on our website for everybody to see the surveillance numbers, to see that versus the county numbers, as transparent as we possibly could be. And just the last few key areas that is noteworthy to mention here, lunchtime. So when we talk about universal masking as being the solution for 3 feet, the biggest concern raised by our doctors, our doctor experts, was lunchtime when the masks come off and people start chatting. They see that in the workplace, and they would expect that in the schools as well. There's lots of strategies, and we had some subgroups that met to talk about this, and Erin's going to talk a little bit about the middle school, high school, but at the elementary level, at the end of the day, the teachers thought we can still manage it. They still want to keep the kids in the classroom because they think they can control the kids in their space better that way. In the tighter spaces, there will be staggered eating as necessary. Students can go home if they are with a guardian, can go outside. Now, not every school can go outside. Unfortunately, Hutch has some constraints, but that they're going to look at all various options. And then lastly, they're talking about instituting quiet time in the classroom, especially with the younger ones, maybe have some reading time or audiobooks or something like that. So Mrs. Carr has some really great resources that she's going to share with everybody just to, make that successful across the spectrum. And the last few things, the 3 feet between desks, or is it between students? We've heard that question a lot. And the task force experts say we're talking about inches of difference between head to head versus the desks. And it's negligible when it comes to, there being transmission, COVID transmission. The desk configuration, I think people have seen, or they at least will see soon. It looks like there's, tables with separators, and then configurations in like threes, clusters, right? Cluster seating.
T's, yep.
T's, sorry. And people were concerned, namely because they say the students, it's best to be in the same direction, facing the same direction. But the experts say, you know what? But it's creating more space, and that trumps the direction that the students are facing, because this does really maximize space in our classrooms. So with that said, I'm gonna turn it over to Erin to finish the last couple substantive areas. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Okay. Thank you, Kristen. I want to reiterate some of what Dr. Champ said. Kristen is a total star. I have known her for a number of years in a few different leadership capacities. I am of the belief that there's nothing she can't do. I also want to thank Dr. Champ, who has worked tirelessly this year, last summer, last year. It feels like it's been a decade since the pandemic began. It's only been a year, but I know that you have worked tirelessly to continue the vital work of educating our students, keeping our teachers and our families safe. So we are all grateful to you, always. My name is Erin Ginsberg. I'm a communications professional, the parent at Pelham Middle School and Colonial School. I'm a member of the task force, and I was on the subcommittee assigned to the secondary campus. My remarks will be brief. I'm going to touch upon the middle and high school plan and our considerations around the fully virtual model and student emotional health, well-being, and teacher support. I want to start out by saying that I know there are secondary school parents sitting at home tonight who want to hear from our task force that we have all of the answers written down on this piece of paper. And that is not what I'm here to say. Throughout the pandemic, our capacity to increase density in our schools has always been a function of having the space to do so. While we're thrilled that our elementary schools have the ability to safely offer full-time in-person to every K-5 learner while maintaining 3 feet of distance, our physical campus on the secondary school do not allow this possibility. So while it is the recommendation of the task force to increase the amount of in-person instruction time we offer to middle and high school students, we must have a final and complete picture of how many students wish to return before we can get there. To that end, and I cannot stress this enough, the data is critical, and the district and the administrators on the secondary campus are working tirelessly to collect any outstanding enrollment selections. It is natural that among thousands of students, we would not have gotten everybody at this point. They are working very hard to do so. It is a time-consuming process, but the task force agrees we must see it through to its conclusion. It's our hope that we'll have a complete picture during the first week of April, and we'll be able to present a more in-depth plan for the secondary phase-in at the next Board of Ed meeting, which is April 7th. The report that Kristen wrote will take you through granular details about how the secondary campus will manage the phase-in process when it begins. I'm going to give you some broad strokes. They may be familiar if you've been seeing the earlier presentations. We intend the phase-in to begin during April, 2 grades at a time. The phase-in model depends on some academic factors, exam readiness, whether exams are happening in the way we think they're going to, and some emotional factors. Our seniors only have maybe 8 weeks of school left by the time we get to the end of April, 6 weeks maybe. And so that is a factor too. And those factors will determine how the phase-in rolls out. The hybrid model will remain in place for the grades that have not reached their phase-in week yet. And I think that's a critical point because we've had a lot of questions about whether students would be home virtual until it was their turn in the rotation. And that is not the case. They will remain in a hybrid model. We will maintain 5 minutes of passing time between classes. And the Bell schedule will allow for a school day that begins at 8:15 and ends at 2:46 with an academy period from 2:51 to 3:11. So it will mirror greatly what school was like pre-pandemic in terms of the length of the school day. We spent a lot of time talking about lunch, and the report goes through a really in-depth presentation of the factors that we discussed. I am not going to repeat them all here because it would take a long time. But I want to say a couple of things. We on the task force recognize that lunch is a special component of student wellness. It's a critical component of student wellness. It's not just about nutrition. It allows for unstructured social interaction, unstructured time, a release valve from the pressures of the academic school day. It is vital. Its importance can't be overstated. In our current scenario, in good weather, we are good. We have open campus extended from grades 9 through 12. That will continue for the remainder of the year. And by switching our lunchtime to a model where half of students have lunch while half have a recess period outside, and then we switch, so one rotation in and out, we are able to accommodate every single middle school student on their schedule. The catch is I'm talking about good weather, and we live in the Northeast and sometimes the weather isn't good. So we talked a lot about the challenges of lunch on inclement weather days. The report goes into a lot of ways, a lot of the challenges and ways to address them using the number of students in lunch across both campuses and looking specifically at the numbers in every period from periods 4 through 8, which are the periods we use for lunch. Again, this is an area where we don't just need final numbers generally, we need specific final numbers for every student by period and by school before we can tell you exactly where everyone will be. But we believe that we have some flexibility around some of the other spaces in the building that will help us meet this challenge when we have the final numbers. With regard to our fully virtual learners, we will continue to use Google Meet and Google Classroom with open office hours in the afternoon to support them. The task force agrees that should the need remain in the fall for a virtual option, we need to look at fully virtual students for those teachers in the fall, if that is still the case. With regard to mental health and wellness, the task force believes it to be vital to have strong systems in place for all students, full-time and virtual, in-person, full-time and virtual, and fully virtual. We know that our students' experience of the pandemic will continue even after they return to the classroom full-time in person. We also know that all of our students, families, and teachers have experienced some form of loss this year. Loss of a loved one, loss of routines, loss of milestones and ceremonies. The work of helping our students and teachers manage this next transition is ongoing. This isn't April work. This is work that's going to stretch out in front of us for a long time. So to that end, the task force has outlined key recommendations to ease this transition, including a renewed focus on community building at all 6 schools, a focus on classroom routines and expectations, a focus on social structures and changes, a focus on integrating fully virtual students into community activities, parent training to help with the transition to a full-time in-person environment, to handle separation anxiety, to handle COVID anxiety, to identify mental health needs, especially in young children who present them in a very different way than older children do. We recommend working with community agencies to provide additional support, and we are so blessed as a community to have agencies who are doing this work in such a profoundly impactful way all around us. Helping students manage anxiety with regard to academic performance, especially as it relates to the Regents and to end of the year exams. We recommend surveying students about their experiences and concerns, which may be different than what we think they're going to be. And I think that's a really critical point, that we need to talk to them about what it is they're experiencing. We also expect social anxiety with regard to changes in peer groups and social structures, especially on the secondary campus. And those dynamics will be a focus of community building at the secondary campus and with our professionals in the counseling offices at the secondary campus. The task force has a keen understanding that this will be a difficult period of adjustment for many students for many reasons, and that continued discussion of how best to support students and families is essential. Finally, we talked in great detail about supporting our teachers. Some of the approaches include, I'm just going to briefly go through them, to support our teachers in maintaining engagement across full-time, in-person, and fully virtual cohorts. This is a hard task, and it's so important. To improve sightlines in the classroom by trying to find barriers without the border, or portable projectors to get creative about being able to project images onto a different space to improve the sightlines, expand visible access, in voice amplifiers that can help our students hear what's happening better. We recommend promoting a blended learning approach, finding ways for virtual students to participate in synchronous learning, but also to have asynchronous and screen breaks because it is a longer school day for them now. We will continue and press to seek best practices and find ways to promote authentic learning environments. It turns out we're actually not the only school district experiencing the pandemic, and we think that there is lots out there that will continue to help us as we grow in this new reality. And finally, and really important, actually, a critical piece, is the task force fully supports the continued early release on Wednesdays, which is critical time for our teachers. They needed to assess and plan to figure out how to continue moving forward in this dual environment. They also needed to assess our students and how they're doing, and to balance all of their learners' needs across all their learners, the learning models that we have to them. So we fully support maintaining that schedule. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Kristen. Thank you.
I'm going to say the same about you. I don't think there's anything you can't do. Just a really quick wrap up. The work of the task force is not done. We plan to convene in the coming weeks to assess how things are going. And then we're going to begin the planning for fall in earnest. Hopefully this will be a great roadmap for us in planning in the fall, but we really are going to get that started soon. And finally, we just, again, reiterate the need for the community's help. It takes a village. Luckily, we have two. And we just ask people to continue encouraging the masks, participating in the surveillance testing, and applying for positions here. We're looking for monitors and substitutes, and we really do need people's help. So thank you. And if there are any questions, happy to answer them.
Oh, sorry, Leah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I am very grateful to have been able to participate also in this task force and wanted to echo what Dr. Champ said and what each of you said about the amazing group of incredibly talented, dedicated community members who participated in this task force. It was a lot of time and a lot of really smart people thinking about what was best for our students and teachers. So thank you to the task force. Kristen, thank you very much. You were very quiet on many of the calls, but the amount of time that you spent putting into that report is really, really admirable. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your help on the
You're
task
welcome.
force as well. You were great.
And Erin, thank you as well for showing up here tonight, for your articulate words on behalf of our kids. So thank you both.
So I just want to say that it's so impressive to see this amount of detail in such a short period of time. And so it's very clear how much thought went into this. And I think that it helped reiterate some of the things that we thought were true, and bring up some things that perhaps hadn't been considered. So it seems like an excellent roadmap. I appreciate the thought and concern that's gone into the data as well too, because we all see how critical that is, and our space issues unfortunately are real and not going away. So appreciate the thought on the secondary presentation to not moving too quickly without enough information. So again, amazing work. Thank you both, and everyone else who participated.
Thanks, Sue.
Yeah, I have to say, the information was really great, and I also really appreciate, I can understand the physical constraints and like how do we solve those problems, but the whole section that you have on the emotional support and really thinking about what those steps are, and not just the first step of getting back, but like all the steps, and that it's not, just as you said, that it's not an April problem, but a huge problem. And it's something that we all have to deal with, not just the students, but it's just, I really appreciate that attention and the thought that went into that, and considering and outlining those ideas and what you're thinking about, because it just helps us all start to understand that issue and not feel so lost or helpless. So I really appreciate that half of the effort too.
And I have to say, Jess, I thank you for pushing us on this issue too. I know you've been behind the scenes really challenging us all throughout this as an elementary parent, you and Jessica both. So I appreciate the continued thoughtfulness on your part as board members to really continue to steer us in this direction. And now it's exciting to bring it to fruition.
It's so much work. It's really great. And it's just, thank you very much to everybody that was on the task force.
I was blown away by the report. When I read it earlier, I got to see it a little bit before the meeting, and it really brought to life some of what I had heard was going on behind the scenes and some of what was mentioned at our last meeting. It was so in-depth and so important to have posted on our website as a document, as a benchmark in this whole process that we've been going through. It's like the next stepping stone from the report that we submitted to the state in August, and also as a stepping stone towards the planning for next year, which I was so encouraged to hear. I know we've talked a lot about, and you've heard me say, let's figure this out for the spring and get things going, because I really want to make sure that the fall we have enough time to plan and prepare for worst case scenarios. So I'm pleased to see that the task force is up and running and has moved so quickly to get our plans for the spring underway, but is already well formed in planning for next year. I just had one question that you mentioned at the end of your first set of comments. In the elementary classrooms, I know a couple of parents have asked me as I've sat in on the principal's coffees,
Yep.
In that T formation, there's been some concern about that. Is the notion of clustering, when you say to allow for more space in the classroom, is it around the other desk? Like you're only really grouping a few kids, but spacing out like the majority of, I don't know if I'm saying
Yeah,
right,
I
but
think it is like the majority of the room.
More kids
but
are
they
spaced
are still
out.
3 feet
Yeah.
between each other.
In some cases, they actually get more than 3 feet by
Right.
clustering. As opposed to being in rows, they would actually be closer.
the cluster of
cases.
children are 3 feet apart as well? Or
Yeah.
okay. That's
There
interesting.
is a
It's harder to see
picture.
in that picture. I
It's
couldn't
very
tell.
hard to see.
I mean, I know the barriers there, and that
we
seems
could
really
post
important.
bigger pictures maybe on the website so people can see.
Definitely. Yeah.
But and overall in the room, it creates more space.
I mean,
So,
that I imagined. And in my mind, it seemed like the cluster of kids seemed a little closer together, even though they're safeguarded by the masks and the barriers. However, it seemed like they were spaced away from more children, given that the room is set up that way.
Yep.
No, it's a funny way of saying it, but
If I'm remembering part of that conversation correctly, I think the principals were concerned in the event of an emergency or a need to get out of the classroom quickly for some other reason, that having the desks in rows sometimes makes it harder to get the students out. And this way, with more floor space around them, they could get out more easily.
I want to thank you guys so much. The report is incredibly impressive, and I feel like there are going to be curveballs that are going to come in the next couple of months, and it's going to be incredibly helpful to all of us to be able to look back and say, well, where did we start with, and what was the rationale there, and where did that not play out as we thought it would, or should we go back to that? So I think that backup is incredibly useful, and I'm really grateful. I did have one question. I know you said that, so for the high school, for instance, once we start to move grades back in, the grades are more mixed, than they are in elementary and middle school. So I know that the kids will be hybrid while they're waiting to be full-time. But so that just seems really complicated. So, I can't even really say it.
It's going to be a little messy, but it should work itself out, because if the bell schedule remains the same, and then, we phase in if we start with seniors, for the most part, that's going to be designated classes, but there's probably going to be electives where there's
Right.
maybe 10th through 12th graders. 12th graders will be there on their schedule. The 10th graders might still be on their AB schedule for a little while, but eventually it will,
Right.
it will come together.
Right.
Yes, it's going to be a little messy.
Kristen, I have a question. Obviously, this is still a live document. You were talking about that you're going to start thinking about the fall in coming meetings. Is the task force, can new people, now that they read this, you're going to get a lot of people, a lot more interest in it. Is it still open, or is the task force pretty much firm in
Well,
terms
we have a
of it?
pretty large group.
I understand it. I envision people coming to us asking us, can they now be part of it? And I want to have the
Yeah.
company line answer for them.
Yeah, and I've actually had a couple people reach out to me since, and to be honest, I'm afraid if we get any bigger, it's not going to be as productive and manageable. So for now, I'd like to keep the group that we have intact, because we have that base knowledge discussion. If people drop off and we have a need for additional expertise, certainly I think we would look to fill some of those gaps if they present. The thing people may want to do is speak to their building principal. If there's something specific
Good idea, yeah.
they think they can bring to supplement the work, because each building really still does have to work out some things on their own anyways. So whether it's through site-based or PTA or just, what other groups of parents they may have working with them, that's where I would steer them to be of help.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
I was rather daunted by the size of this report when I got it this afternoon. So I'm sorry to say I haven't been able to read it in detail, but I've been trying to assimilate it as we were talking here. And a few things spring to mind. I thought the discussion of the cluster versus facing the same direction was really interesting. Really interesting. And I guess my question is, what are you suggesting? What are you recommending? Clustering? Is that sort of where you're leaning?
Clustering, the seating that we're proposing is perfectly fine according to our medical
Yeah.
experts.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I can see that, the way it's
And
worked
John,
there.
what I would say to that is what we've been advising the principals is, in light of these discussions, that ideally, all desks in rows facing one direction is recommended in the guidance. But given the conversations with our medical experts, if you can get better spacing by clustering, that the distance between students trumps the directionality. So if you can do rows and you can still get 3 feet or more, do your rows and do 3 feet or more. But if you can get more than 3 feet by clustering,
So we're leaving up to the building leaders, basically? Is that what you're
yes,
saying?
and that's partially too because each rooms, our rooms, they're all so
Yeah,
unique.
no, I understand. There's a big
Yeah, some will work
variety of
great in
spaces,
rows,
sizes.
And the
yeah.
some
number
are
of
going to
kids in
have
each
to
class
have
is very ideal,
clustering.
too.
to
Okay.
fit.
I thought that was
tables.
really interesting.
That's the other piece.
The other thing I had a question about was you mentioned that this can't be finalized until you have final numbers for the middle school and high school. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just felt like we're so close to getting many more details that we could add. It's never going to be perfect and things are going to be changing as we go along, but those are key details that I really wanted to have, at least what the phased in was going to look like.
Right.
And just some more details on the
Okay.
middle school, high school.
Yep.
So
Well, I
it'll be
think-
finalized within the next few weeks.
On those criterion, you could probably never finalize it because information keeps changing. But anyway.
Hold me to it. I will finalize it, I promise.
I guess my next question was, how do you see that information, especially on the number of kids coming back, making a big difference in the outcome of this report? And if so, how?
Could be. I mean, it could be. That's why we have the surveillance and the metrics tracking. It's really crucial to just monitoring everything. I mean, we hope not.
Yeah,
I was
and
referring more to the number of kids that are opting to stay full.
Oh, sorry.
I can speak some
Yes,
to that
please.
too, since I have some of the inside information. Not that I'm going to give it out tonight, but we're in the process of collecting. So really what we're needing to do at the secondary level is a couple things. We know that we can't fit all the students at 100% and still get 3 feet. So, we through our MTSS process in particular, we've been working throughout this year to identify those students in most need to be prioritized as the regulations guided us to. So, students to be in person every day. So first off, we're making sure we identify how many of those students are going to be every day based on their need. And then how much space does that leave us in the classrooms? We're finalizing, as Kristen mentioned, calling parents, making sure that we get the wishes of all students, all parents recorded. And then we're going to see how much space do we have left and what percentage of that group who wants to be in person can we fit in the classrooms. So I do anticipate that we're probably going to be looking at a different cohort model, a more robust cohort model. So one that either divided students into more groups instead of just 2 groups, probably additional groups with more in-person days as part of their rotation. It's just a matter of what's that percentage, how do we rotate them so that we can make sure that we get the 3 feet distancing. So we're hoping to decide that. Well, I know that there's not that many school days between now and our next board meeting. Believe it or not, there's only about 4 school days. But we're hoping 5 school days if you count our next meeting day. We're hoping to get that information nailed down in those days.
It seems a daunting task.
It is.
And
some of it's going to be
computer program, right?
Some of it's going to be educated guessing, in all
I'm sure.
honesty, and that's the trick with secondary. Even at a 50% cohorting model that we've been at, there's classrooms where you might have 5 students and another classroom next door might have 19.
Yeah.
Because schedules don't rotate alphabetically. Student schedules, especially as they get to 10th, 11th, and 12th, are so unique. You really, honestly, unless you were to sit and go student by student through 900 schedules at the high school, you're never really going to know. So we're going to have to make a little bit of educated guessing based on percentages. But we've got a smart group.
I can certainly tell that. Well, thank you very much for all your efforts.
What percentage of surveys would you say we're still waiting on from
Very
middle school
small.
and
We
high
were
school?
down to, I think, fewer than 50 parents that each the middle school and high school respectively were trying to
great.
connect with.
I have this vision of the school counselors and building administrators going
Yeah, they were on
on
round
and off
3
the
of
phone for
emails
the
and
last
phone
number of
calls,
days.
and and it's
It's
tough 'cause
important work, though.
it's I don't know if people are busy or don't get the messages, or in some cases people don't want to make the choice.
Yeah.
They want the hybrid, so they don't want to have to commit to that, but we still have to plan. So we're
So
going to,
perhaps the individual outreach then actually
and
work to
that's
kind
what's
of
been
ease some
happening.
of the
Yeah, since
concerns.
the 17th, we saw where we were, and then starting on the 18th, there's been individual outreach. So
I know we're going to hear in Julie's report, she often speaks about the testing. And
Yeah.
I've kind of gotten the sense that we aren't getting as many volunteers in particular at the secondary level to do the testing. But I'm hearing
Do you
from the
wanna-
report that it's so important to this whole system working. I loved the incentives that were listed in the report about how you get kids out there. But I think
Yeah.
that's something we're going to need to keep explaining and communicating because it sounds essential to us being successful in this endeavor.
Yeah, one of the things I really appreciated from our medical experts is that point that testing is likely to become just a way of life
Yeah.
for schooling. It certainly is, I know, for many of you in your employment. And for our kids going to college, it's just going to become part of the routine. So, I reached out to Mr. Berkowitz to see if he can work with student leadership to come up with some kind of, public service announcements, incentive plans, some way to, as they said in their committee, increase our engagement with testing and make it a positive, make it something maybe to, whether it's like the I voted stickers, you get an I tested sticker or something to, so that students can see it as just becoming part of their normal responsibility as a citizen of the schools. So I think we're going to be taking positive steps, and Julia will speak in her report about some of the changes that she's made in approach. So still a work in progress, but we're getting better.
I know it's not for lack of effort
No.
on your part,
Not at all. Great.
principals or athletic directors. So.
Exactly. Okay. Well,
Any other questions?
Uh,
Okay, that was excellent.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for coming tonight.
thank you
Thank
both
you.
so much. Thanks to the committee, the task force. Hopefully lots of them are watching tonight who couldn't be here, but just really tremendously thankful for their work. And we do look forward to reconvening once we started the implementation of full-time to, as Krista mentioned, see how it's going and then start to get the plans in place for the fall.
Great. 4.2 is the Board of Education committee reports. Do we have any committees to report tonight? No? Okay. 4.3 is Assistant Superintendent's update on authentic learning. Dr. Garcia.
Good evening. So this has nothing to do with authentic learning because state testing has nothing to do with authentic learning. So, but I know we talked a little bit about this at the last board meeting, basically stating that we're waiting for the state to tell us what the federal government was saying about the waiver for state assessments connected to the Every Student Succeeds Act in the federal level. Well, lo and behold, the federal government basically denied the waivers. So the state has issued its plan or its approach for state testing this spring. So more information is going to have to come out because there's so much leeway that's given to districts in terms of the administration of it, who takes the test, what it means in terms of transcripts. The one thing we talked a little bit about this last meeting was that the state is really trying to give flexibility. And if it was up to them, it appears as if they wouldn't have any standardized tests this year. And the reason why I can say that with confidence is that they have canceled the Algebra 2, Geometry, Chemistry, Physics, Global History, and US History exams, Regents exams this year. They're not happening. And they're also not happening in August. So the only exams that we are obligated to administer for Regents is the Algebra 1, English Language Arts, Living Environment, and Earth Science. So there are also some new Regents exam dates for the administration of it, and that will happen in June. But there is a 12, 13-page frequently asked question document that is accompanied that explains or tries to respond to all the questions that may happen in the field, like, if I take this exam, will it show up on my transcript? Okay, well, that's a little complicated. The answer is technically yes, but we're gonna have to do a lot of, I think, coaching and teaching of parents to make sure that they are making the right decision. Because if you don't take the exam, you really don't have to if you are passing the course. If you pass the course, you don't really have to take the exam, and you just get an exempt on your transcript, E, which is the same, letter that was given on last year's Regents exams. And apparently, even if you take the exam, the way you read this document, the frequently asked questions, even if you take the Regents in, let's say, English Language and Arts, a parent or child could also, even though they got a score, can ask for the exempt on their Regents. So there are a lot of moving parts to it. Districts are really trying to interpret and understand what plan or action they want to take. Tomorrow we have one of our meetings with the secondary administrators to kind of start unpacking this, like, do we count Regents exams as 10% of your final grade, right? Which is what we've done before. Well, that's one of the things we're probably gonna take away. But there really needs to be an education of parents in terms of understanding that they're making the right choice for their child, okay? The state it didn't want to give any of these exams because they know the pandemic has really complicated learning and teaching this whole year. But they're obligated to do it because the federal government did not grant the waiver. So that's where we are, and there'll be a lot of communication with parents from the high school and the middle school, especially 8th graders, because of the first wave that takes Regents is in Earth Science, and some of them may take also Algebra 1. So we need to make sure that we kind of have the same philosophy as last year to hold children harmless. The state's kind of given us a little leeway for that. And they've also said if you're a full virtual child, you have no obligation to come in and take any of these exams. So understand that there's really no way to measure or to assess children in this standardized approach at the high school level. Again, now we just shift a little bit to the 3 through 8 exams. So just when we want to bring the students back, right? It was April 12th, we're bringing K-5 back. A week later, they're scheduled 3 through 8 and 3 through 5 students are scheduled to take ELA exams. So we're trying to find a way to make sure that children, again, are held harmless. You know that we anticipate, just like in the past, a number of people who may want to opt out of these tests. We're trying to find a way where if you decide as a parent to opt out of the test for the child, that you kind of don't really still miss school, because if we have these tests being administered, we have really nowhere to house your children if you're opting out like in the past. So there are complications with it. So we're going to talk that over also with the elementary administrative team tomorrow as well. We have some proposals and some ideas which are unique. Some school districts have already sent out surveys to parents saying, hey, are you planning on opting into these tests in X, Y, and Z? We're not going to send out any surveys about state tests before spring break. And I think you kind of assume why, especially at the secondary level, where we're still trying to collect data on whether they're even coming back or whether they want to come back full time. So we're trying to kind of level out and make sure there's no conflict when parents receive a notice. So we have opportunities which can create flexibility. Also, one thing with the 3 through 8 exams, the only mandated part of the test is part 1, which is multiple choice. The state said that it's going to be a shorter exam, and the reason why it's going to be shorter in part 1 is because they're going to take away those sneaky, tricky field test questions out. Remember those questions when you're a student, you take a test and you're like, oh my God, I don't know the answer to this question, because they're trying to figure out whether it's a valid question. They're going to take those out. Regardless, that means you're really not going to have the data you're going to have on children is, well, firstly, you're not going to get it until sometime in September, October, who knows when. There's no validity to it because we don't know what other schools are doing, and we can't really measure between this, and kids are home, full virtual, you don't have to take the test. You can if you want, but so then we also have to make accommodations for, you have a child who may have been home the whole year, may continue to want to be home full virtual, but may want to come in and take the test, and then where do we put that child, right? Do we isolate things? It's very complicated. So we're going to try to make some nice recommendations after the break. We just have to sort of sort it out a little bit and really give everyone the opportunity, every family who wants their child to take part 1 of an ELA or math or even the new 4th grade science test, because those are the 3 exams that you would see if you're a 4th grade child. And we're going to share it with the community, and we're going to we'll have a survey. It could be an opt-in survey more than, let's say, an opt-out. Like if you want to opt in to take your state exam, this is when we're going to do it. This is what our plan is. Please come in. So there are a lot of moving parts to it, and it is, it just makes it more complicated knowing that the priorities are challenging for us and for the kids. So that's the update. I know it's complicated, but are there any questions around that? Because we haven't really decided in terms of the approach, but the framework is we have to offer these exams. Whether kids take it is a whole different story, and the state doesn't really, they're not concerned about that right now.
So I have a question. Hi, I have a question, because I was the one to ask before about this. So I'm trying to make sure I understand what you're saying. So the state is offering the exams, but not requiring kids to take them. Is that the gist of it?
That is the gist of it, yes.
So what is the point of it?
The point is really it's a decision that's being made, and really it's not. We can't fault the state because they're trying to they try to waiver. It's making it, to be honest with you, very complicated for us, especially we bring back students full time, right? Because we don't really want to take a few hours out of their day when they're come back full time. We want to get back to learning experience and so forth. But now we have to reserve time to kind of test them, but not every kid's going to want to be tested. So we could wind up with a very small group. So we're trying to find ways in our schedule, which, that would be the least interruptive. So we may have time that we can do.
So we don't collect any useful data.
The data will be useless in essence. Yeah.
So was my concern previously. How do we actually make an assessment of what our children have lost, presumably in this past year, and then make plans to catch everybody back up? Yeah. Well, how do we do that?
Well, we do have the Ames web testing data, like I mentioned to you, right? Which is a standardized approach that we've been using, and we continue to use it. Kids take it 3 times a year, and that's like the benchmark measure that we've been using and we'll continue to use.
So that will be
That
continued.
would be very helpful. Plus, also the assessments that children are, taking with the kids, with the teachers. They could be running records in the reading approach, right? We have math assessments we go on. We have online math assessments that we take. So those are really our internal measures that we use, which, to tell you the truth, have always been more valuable for us anyway, in terms of assessing how kids grow.
Thanks.
Steve? So it sounds like the data is useless. New York State doesn't really care if we do these tests, but the federal government does.
Yes.
So that means that if we don't offer the tests, then we lose some funding?
No,
what happened?
we have to make sure that it's offered, right? We don't know what it's going to happen in terms of the accountability piece for participation. We have no idea, right? Usually there's if you go below 95% participation rate, that has been pretty much silent by the state right now. The federal government has just been sort of hell-bent on saying, oh, but we still need data and standardized tests. But the state's going to figure out how to do that. So we're interested in making sure kids, as we know, are here full-time, they're in person, they're back to a greater sense of normalcy in the classroom.
Right.
This is making it more complicated. And if there was useful things that we can come out of this, I think that would be a different story. But the gamesmanship that we're hearing from other districts right now in terms of trying to manipulate it, and maybe we're not going to even offer this test, it's making it, the integrity of any of these tests is really thrown out the window. And that's what's hard, because we're going to be wasting some precious time. And we want to try to minimize that. So we're trying to be creative with it. We're obligated to administer it, but maybe there's a way of saying that, come in at a certain time that maybe you normally wouldn't come in, like a Wednesday afternoon.
Thank
So
you.
we're going to work on it. We'll have
Yeah.
better information probably after tomorrow.
Thanks for the context. It's
Sure.
very helpful.
And a letter at some point, imagine when you figure out the approach, will go to parents. So
Yeah,
they
we
understand what
do.
the choices are.
Yeah, and communicate with parents saying, this is when we plan on offering the exam, because we have a window now. We're 10 days to offer it. But, we want to tell you, this is when, we're going to plan on doing it. Are you planning on having your child take it?
Right.
And that's what some districts are doing already, because, think about the spacing and the extended time and the classroom environment that would be needed to make sure that all the students have their accommodations
Right.
like we normally do.
It's
with
already a
testing.
very involved process.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to be able to just bring kids back and try to, but we will everyone's in the same boat, and we'll handle it, and we'll let the community know what we're going to do.
Very good. Thank you.
I wish there was more, scintillating information, but tomorrow we have an authentic learning committee
Yes.
meeting. So
And I look forward to it. Okay, 4.4 is Assistant Superintendent's update on the whole child.
Aaron.
Thank you.
Good evening. So I have two areas I'm going to report on tonight, and they're both actually directly related to the reopening plans. One is social emotional, wellness of our kids, and the other is the COVID testing. You guys are bad. I did want to start out by talking about the HAAS survey, which is the High Achieving School Survey. We gave that this morning during periods 1, 2, and part of 3. We wanted to make sure that we gave the students the opportunity to finish the survey. For those who are not familiar with it, historically, Pelham Together and I think also the civics a couple of years ago, who paid for the survey, and the district have worked together probably for the last dozen years in providing, giving a survey biannually to students in grades 8, 10, and 12. And it's really just to measure the wellness of our students and also substance use. And so this year, as we were planning for it, because we had the HAAS survey done 2 years ago, we talked about, do we keep it as 8, 10, and 12? And because this is such a different year with the pandemic, we really felt that it would be good for us to just give it to all grades 6 through 12. So middle school administration, high school administration, myself, Laura Caruso, a couple of other folks from middle school and high school, our PPS staff, we looked at the questions and we did take away some of the questions because it's quite a long survey. I know last time we gave it, it was quite long as well, and so many of the students couldn't finish it. So we wanted to make it reasonably long enough to gather enough information, but we did review everything, and I think we gave it to all 6 through 12 today. I did hear back that we had about 1,500 surveys that they received. I don't know to what extent every single survey is going to be counted because it depends on how much of it was completed. But we did have every single student, both in person and virtual, take the survey today. Just to give a little bit of background on the Haas survey, it is conducted by Authentic Connections, which is a research group that have been working to nationally really to work with high achieving schools to really figure out where the adolescents are and how they're doing, and really giving school districts comparison data so that we could figure out, okay, so this is where kind of the average is, this is where you are, there are certain areas where, specific districts may want to target in terms of programming and intervention. And so that's kind of what we're hoping to get. And so that's why we did all grade 6 through 12 this year. I believe we should be getting the results probably in the next couple of weeks. This probably won't take that long. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring that data, and hopefully that's something that we can share with the task force. We can certainly, Pelham Together has been extremely, we're grateful to, Laura Caruso for always partnering with us to get this going and to gather the data. So once we get it, we'll present the data to everyone. Do you have any questions on the Haas survey before I move on to COVID?
Just one question. I'm sorry. I mean, it's a stupid question. Is it a survey or is it an assessment?
It's a survey.
Okay.
It's completely anonymous. There's no way of tracking any data back to any particular student. The goal of this survey is really trying to get a broader sense of, by grade level, by possibly, male versus female versus, non-binary versus, however the students may define themselves. We're just trying to figure out where they are and how they're doing. It really is just a wellness survey.
Okay.
So.
I wanted to just also say
Yes.
that prior to the survey being the High Achieving Schools survey, the survey was given every 2 years, 12 years, starting about 12 years ago. It's only been this cycle and the prior that it was part of the High Achieving Schools survey, and it was a big benefit because our rates of substance use and mental health issues were always compared to these national numbers or sometimes county numbers. And it was so broad and watered down. And we always kind of wondered, well, given the dynamics and the demographics of this town, is it any different if you look at it as in comparison to similar towns? So we went with the High Achieving Schools survey, but it is completely comparable. Like all the same questions are asked. It's just how we look at it. And going through this organization, Authentic Connections, where they work with specifically other high achieving schools, it's really added a layer of value. And it's driven a lot of the programming that Pelham Together does.
And Julia, this year in particular, you made sure that there was a focus on, in particular, mental health and how the kids were feeling during this time. So
Right.
this survey was tailored a little bit, right?
Yes, and this year they added actually some open-ended questions into the survey. So I'm really curious to get the results. Okay, so moving on to surveillance testing.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry, I wanted to ask one more question about the survey. You mentioned it was given every 2 years and it was always given to 8, 10, 12. So we're always capturing the same students. Is that intentional, or do we want to, what about the other odd grades?
Well, the reason it started the way that it was, at least with respect to Pelham Together, is that the kind of organization that Pelham Together began as and kind of where it got its funding and all of that required that testing, 8th, 10th, and 12th. So we couldn't afford anything else.
I see. Okay.
So we did that. But it's always nice to be able to do more. And because it was every 2 years, you got a much better sense of kind of how your programming was filtering into your community, as well as kind of what was going on in the rest of the world. And changes like that don't happen so quickly. Although it's always nice to have more data. So I think that we took advantage this year of being able to, or having an even greater need to get feedback on more kids. And then there was some more funding put towards it that we were able to do because of a lot of the other things that weren't happening. So I think that this was taking advantage of a good opportunity. And, I think we'll see, right? If we get tons of information, then we'll hope to do it that way going forward. And if not, then, we'll see, we'll go back.
I mean, I can see it being beneficial either way. Like you're comparing the same grades as they go every 2 years, which maybe you get feedback that way, or.
Yeah. Well, we
But I
still,
guess
and
it's
we
just
still will. We'll be able to
Yeah.
compare this year's 8, 10,
Exactly.
and 12 to
Right.
last session's 8, 10, and 12. And so we'll see how that goes.
But the additional data we'll have this year would be all the other grade levels compared to the national data. So that'll also be very helpful.
There are places that do 6 through 12 every year.
Right.
So there's always more.
I was just wondering if there was I mean, of course, there's a reason behind that decision, but I didn't know if it was a information gathering reason.
I think the one thing too that I think we had talked about trying to expand it, and this year certainly presented a unique need. And I think the nice part of having each grade level now will give us the ability to target our programming next year to each grade level, because there are some at times different patterns from different cohorts.
Right.
So I think, to your point, to be able to share this with the task force and round out our planning going forward, I think will just be so helpful. And especially as, one of the recommendations in the report you probably saw is to bring on some additional assistance, clinical assistance in the short term to help us through this. And that's something that we're already exploring. And to me, that it's just the perfect marriage of here's the data, get some additional assistance, and let's be sure that we get right in there and intervene with our kids as quickly as we can in the ways that are going to make a real difference.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to surveillance testing. So we had a lot more students participate last week. We also started testing elementary school students. So last week we had a total of 138 students, so a lot closer to our 5%. This week so far, we only have 109. We didn't get as many of, I guess, the athletes. I know you talked about this before, but we did actually get a good amount of middle and high school students today. We had 64 middle and high school students who are non-athletes. But, I think what we did is we actually changed from having parents sign up on Wednesday afternoons to asking parents to send in the consent. And I have Barbara and Lindsay from the two main offices making appointments for students once we have the consent. And the other thing that, over the last few weeks of testing, we realized that we really could test a lot of kids within like 15 minutes. I was originally thinking 8 to 10. Now we're testing about 30 students in 15 minutes. And so we're able to, because it is such a quick process and it's a very easy, process. So we were able to do that right after school. Some of the feedback that we received from the parents is that, it's hard for students to walk home and then come back at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. And that's kind of when I was asking people to sign up between, 12:30 and I think until about 3 o'clock. And so we also moved all the time up to right after school. We're testing a lot more kids right after school. And in terms of the number of consents that we actually received 136 consents in the middle school and 180 in the high school. It's less than 20% of our population. So I'm still hoping that, parents who have not turned in the consent will certainly consider doing that at this point. We will continue to accept the consents. The way I set it up for them, for the two folks who are doing the scheduling, is that we're looking at all the people that have tested previously, and then I'm tracking it by date so that we can rotate with the amount of people that we have consent from. But obviously, if I only have 150 people out of 700 students, we're going to have to go back at some point, and so we're not getting the breadth of group of the diverse testing that we're hoping for. So I'm just asking the community, please send the consents in, and we will get a better, I think, outcome in terms of surveillance testing.
Is the
Thank you,
consent
Julia.
the same?
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead. I just have a
So I
small
see
question.
Kristen taking notes, and I think this is a perfect job for the task force, right? To, in the same way that they did community mobilization to help us get kids back in school, we need the same level of community mobilization to acknowledge that there's a trade-off for this, right? I mean, that everyone has to play their part in the community, and testing of students going forward is going to be critically important. So I would say to people, please, please do your part.
Julia, is the consent that was recently emailed out, is that the same consent form that was previously sent? Like if you filled it out the first go around, that counts?
Yes, actually, I'm putting all of the consents together. And
So
so
you
that
don't
if
need
I
to
have
fill it
the
out a
original
second
consent, then yeah, I'm not asking for people to fill it out again. But the rest of the families that have not sent it in at all, it would really help us if they could send it in.
So to what do you attribute this sort of testing hesitancy?
I'm not sure. Maybe possibly this week could have been that people might have plans for next week. It is a week before spring break.
Huh? Good point.
So that could be part of it. I still don't have the number of athletes that I was hoping to have. I think I may have had maybe about 15 athletes this week, I think. So I was hoping for about 50, but it's I know that is still a concern for students. They don't want to have to quarantine and not be able to play. So
If they were
Julia?
professionals, there wouldn't be a choice.
I'm just curious, if an athlete tests positive, but they've only had outdoor practices, does that extend the quarantine to the whole team?
no, it's going to depend on what type of sport, whether they're indoors, outdoors, how close they were.
That's important information because I think, some of the first cases we had that were amongst teams, it resulted in the entire team. And some of that was because I think it was high risk sports, the
And they were
nature
indoors.
of the sport and the location of the sport. But I think that definitely is something that weighs on our students and their parents. So I do think that plays into it a piece. But again, I know that we do need everyone to do their part. I know that the schools have experienced a lot of quarantines over the last couple of months, and people are just so hesitant to do that. But I think we've gotten much more, we've been able to be much more strategic about the quarantines as the guidelines have gotten adjusted, and they've eased up on some of that, that's part of why we've been able to stay open. With vaccines rolling out, with a more targeted quarantining strategy from the Department of Health and Julia's really careful work around that, it's made a significant difference. So the quarantines may not be as likely for people as they think they were, even a month ago. That's probably important information for us to get out too.
Thank you. Okay, 4.5 is Assistant Superintendent's update on finance and facilities. Mr. Ricky.
Hi, good evening. Just have a few things that I could certainly go through. As we're working our way through the budget cycle, we are just about halfway through that point right now. Of course, the budget was first launched on February 24th. We had our day-long budget meeting on the 6th, and we've got another 2 meetings until budget adoption by the board on April 21st. So there's still some other moving parts really that are happening at the state level with regard to revenues and where our state revenues may drop. We're watching that very closely. The state is supposed to pass their budget on April 1st. And at that time, we hope to be able to bring more information back like we do every year and then share that with the board. At the same time, with the passage of the American Rescue Plan, I know we've all heard about different revenues that are going to be available to school districts. We're still waiting to hear our official word from New York State Ed and from our representatives. Certainly, I think we all read in the paper, $622,000 is what it is looking like, with some targeted spending there. Certainly 20% of it as it looks now, it needs to be dedicated towards learning loss, immediate learning loss type programs, with the other 80% kind of having a specific target as well. And as we look at these things, I know these are things that we're going to be working on internally, certainly listening to what we hear from the community and our inside community and outside community. We want to be mindful as well that as of now, we see these monies as one-shot monies or one-time dollars coming from the federal government. That's $622,000, and we want to think about that as we apply those monies towards next year. Once we find out what those official words are, Congressman Bowman is having a webinar tomorrow. I plan on listening to that, hopefully getting some more additional information, and they're doing that for public entities within the congressman's district. On our board meeting tonight, we have 2 change order notifications, relatively small. One was for the Glover Field drainage, just another section of pipe needed to be replaced, something that we had a great picture from the inside, but when they uncovered it from the outside, it was deteriorated and needed to be replaced. However, that work has taken place. We anticipate a turf coming in this Friday to take a look and see if they can start working on the turf for the batting cage work, which is really taking place nicely, and also working to repair some of that damage that we saw on the pitcher's mound at the varsity field, Salamini Field, from earlier in the year. So they're going to address that. So our teams should have a spanking new field ready for them when their season begins. So we're really excited about that, and we're working with our athletic director and our baseball coach on that too. So very exciting. Also at Glover, we've worked with the athletic director, Local Live, on getting some connectivity for cameras. I know we also have them up in this room as well, helpful so that parents can watch sporting events while maintaining and respecting the rules set forth by Section 1 about outside visitors and spectators. So it's a little bit of a running game, getting it done very, very quickly and making sure we have all of the inside, whether it's the electricity or the connectivity, the mounts, but we want to make sure we're able to do that for our Pelham community. And I know, speaking as a parent, it's always great to see when your kids are able to participate in those activities and getting a chance to see that. Tonight's agenda, we've also asked you to approve an installment plan agreement with BOCES. This is for the purchase of our computer technology for next year. This is we hold this until the board or the community approves a budget. So it's not something, we're not making a purchase for next year beforehand, but we want to make sure everything is in line so that we are prepared to move quickly. Acquiring the technology is requiring an even longer timeline than previously needed. So it's really important that we make sure we get in the line quickly for this. And this just sets us up and puts us in the right place. Last year, if you recall, we did this right at about the same time of the year too. But we hold this in abeyance pending passage of the school district's budget. Also have some operating and maintenance bid renewals. Again, if you look at those are held to the CPI for last year or lower than that. And we only recommend moving forward vendors with which we have a good experience and we believe to provide a good value to the district. We also have the amended district-wide safety plan, which takes into account the public health emergency sections that needed to be added. If you recall at the last board meeting, there was a public hearing. There was a recommendation about just amending some of that language with regard to how classes would come back if we were doing it on an emergency basis, whether we were AM, PM, or on-day, off-day cohort. And that language has been amended to provide flexibility really to having that type of return based on the best interests of the district. And that's honestly what we've been doing here. Hutchinson School remains on schedule. We see that they're working on that furniture order, and it's exciting to see. Again, all that work that's moving ahead. The inside work is really it's really impressive. Again, you see the sheetrock, the tiles. Whenever you'd like another tour, it's always great to get a chance to look at it. And I think we're all very much getting excited about seeing it. It's just going to be a great asset for the community in the years moving forward. At Prospect Hill, we had a little bit of a slow up with getting the utilities, utility works connected. We think we're on the right path now, and we hope to see some more progress moving there a little bit more progress than what we've seen. We got the fence up real fast, and we moved a lot of dirt around at the beginning, and not a lot happened. So now hopefully we'll see a little bit more move forward at this point in time. At the high school, we have the bid out for the restoration of the front of the building. And that was some additional work that had been identified. So hopefully we'll get that back in the next month. We'll evaluate those bids and see where we are, and then bring together the bond steering committee group to discuss the results of that for a final recommendation for the board. We're also getting ready for clearing out the business office space to look for our interior renovation work, which would start May 1st in the PPS office and in the curriculum director office spaces as well. So we're moving forward, and with that, we're finishing up our work at 314 Pelhamdale. We're able to share with two members of the board today. We're able to get a chance to walk through. Certainly, we want to make that opportunity available to everybody as well. And I think we've done a nice job at turning really an old home into hopefully productive office space. Let's see. We're also working with architects as far as the rental of the office space that Dr. Champ and Dr. Garcia's offices and the PPS office would eventually be moving to as a final administrative office areas. And then lastly, and certainly not in order of priority, we've been working a lot on reopening. A lot of time with the committees working on everything. Our bid came back for our tents. We got one less bidder this time, which meant we didn't get any bidders because last time we had one bidder. We have gone out and we've asked for written quotes from 4 different vendors. I've received 1 quote back, which is good, 1 written quote and 2 promises. But we believe we've got a viable quote that keeps us within our purchasing rules and regulations and something that we can act on and do something on the exterior to provide some outdoor spaces, especially as I'm pointing to people who aren't here anymore. I'm sorry, but as was said earlier, rainy days are a challenge, and having some flexible outdoor spaces would certainly be helpful. And talking with one of those vendors today, he even shared with me, he said, it was crazy at the beginning of the year last year. It slowed down. Now the phone calls are starting up again. So we're all, again, as we said, we're all kind of thinking the same things, and we're trying to create those spaces and make it available.
Jim, real quick, a question on that. Given the quote that we got and the process that we've gone through and the amounts that quote came in, is that something that we'll need the board to act on, or is that something that within your or my thresholds we can?
Thank you. Yes. It totally falls below the amount for a bid to be, so we would need a bid for a purchase over $20,000. This will fall below that level, the cumulative purchase amount for that purchase. So with our written quotes, we fall within those parameters, which is good because when we have all that information, we won't have to come back to the board for final approval. But certainly, we were able to fall within all those guidelines.
And Jim, is there inventory this go around? I know we got a lot of bids back in the fall. I thought we had bids back in the fall, but then when we went to execute, there wasn't inventory. Or maybe I had that
there
wrong.
wasn't a lot in the fall, and
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of people looking in the fall too. And then when the prices came back and the supply was so short, I think some people really pulled back, same as we did. From what I'm hearing from the vendors, it sounds like there's certainly an increased demand, but they have a supply.
Okay,
And it's
that's good.
again, I've got one quote and 1 promise. So, well, 2 promises, but one sounds a little bit more reliable than the other. Again, things that we're looking to do here. I mean, we're ordering folding tables because we need to get our desks back up into the classrooms. Our fans are here, so our exhaust fans are taken care of. Our air purifiers are on a truck somewhere between here and Texas, which is a great sign. A local university or local college has offered to loan us some desks, which is terrific. We're grateful for that as well, and that will help us out in a pinch.
That's thanks to Christenberg also, right?
It is.
Need
Absolutely.
some more credit for that.
We've looked and ordered for new clear barriers without any white boundary on it for our elementary students, which can really be affixed because our elementary students are at the same desk every day versus our secondary school, where they different students at a different desk every period. So we have ordered those dividers, and we're told it's a 10-day delivery time. So if they're true to their word, I should have them by Friday. But we're pushing them hard, and we're following up on that every day. And then lastly, too, we're putting out another RFP for pupil personnel services, for counseling service and other potential services that may be needed as we learn from students what their extended needs may be. And that's hitting the street on Monday. We'll receive that back on the 21st, and somewhere between the 21st and that time, we'll be able to evaluate those and make recommendations to the board for an award. So we're trying to stay busy.
Jim, one more question about the dividers. I've heard also from middle school parents that's kind of like a sea of dividers with the borders. I know we don't have the final plans at the secondary level finalized yet, but are we also looking at new dividers at the upper grades?
We are. The tough part is really the best thing about the white part on the divider is it provides the structure
Yeah.
to the
Really,
to
the only
unit holding.
structure is pretty floppy without
It is. And the ones that we have that we're going to be using at the elementary level, they don't fill up. I mean, once you put it on the desk, and we'll fix them to the desk, your portability is just not there. So the real benefit of the middle school, high school dividers is the drawback too, like you mentioned, the boundary. We're keeping our eyes open. I don't know if we're going to be able to get anything for this year. If we're doing this next year, we're going to look at all of our options. But that's the challenge that we face, and being able to get something too.
I wonder if you could do the same kind of a fixed divider and instead have part of the process when you come into the classroom to have or before you leave your classroom to wipe the desk and the divider down and just have
Students are not allowed to be asked to clean.
Gotcha.
We require them to clean the barriers.
The
According to state
canister's there if they
regulations.
want to clean their hands or wipe their desk, but we can't ask them to. I gotcha.
Exactly. Yeah. The unfortunate.
So many good ideas and so many stumbling blocks this year, right?
And I think the other piece that, the most recent CDC guidance said it didn't even speak to the need for barriers. So I think New York State has not adopted that yet. Therefore, we still have to keep doing the barriers, but the ideal would be that they would do away with that requirement.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
then we
don't
wouldn't
invest too much
need to
at the
worry
moment.
about it.
Stick with what we got.
Yeah.
I get that.
I have
Okay.
one question for you. I thought I heard you say the 622,000 we've been on reading about the last few days. Is that required new spending for COVID-related things, or is it meant to compensate for expenses that districts have already put out there?
As I read it, I want to read my.
And I think, Jim, you're attending a workshop tomorrow for more details on the
that
funding.
as well. Yes.
Right.
And that money is in the bank?
No. We were
Well, it was in
lucky
the paper. If it's
It was in the
it
paper.
should
We
be
got
in the
left
bank.
off the aid run the first time, but I did get something actually from Alessandra Biaggi's office while we're sitting here, just confirmation that the funds are coming our way. That was federal allocation through the most recent.
Yes.
Right.
So it's promised. I'm sure it will come with certain strings, and that's what we'll be looking into.
Okay. Well, that
But
was really, I
think
guess
as
the
Jim
strings
said,
question was
certainly
my
I think
question.
20% was supposed to be allocated for learning loss,
Mhm.
and the additional for various things related to COVID.
Supplemental school programs, after summer school, mental health services, technology, facility repairs to improve students' health, improve public health protocols, or activities that address the needs of disadvantaged students.
Right.
Well, that
So-
could have a significant impact on our budget. That's what I'm asking.
No, I mean, and again, if you're looking at the 20% of the 622, again, that's about $124,000. That leaves that other 80% is $498,000.
Yeah, and we're assuming, and again, we'll find out more, but we're assuming it's a one-time infusion. So something
Understood.
certainly we would not want to put towards operating, but to one-time cost. So,
Don't want to hire
potentially.
teachers, in other words.
Right. But potentially, if we're looking to bring on some professional services to assist with, mental health needs, temporary teachers, temporary things, yes, HVAC upgrades, things like that, one-time purchases. would be the
An
place to
an
target it.
online teacher or a remote teacher, something to that effect.
Right, right.
And this is separate than the federal funding that was referenced in our initial budget proposal that was going to be
pandemic
come in the
adjustment.
way of state aid.
Yes.
So
The way we're understanding it is that that 622 is above and beyond,
Okay.
and that's really school or education direct dollars. The other dollars would be through the state to support state programs, and then the distribution of the state, obviously, we would receive our portion, our other portion through the state and their regular allocation method like we always do every year.
Thank you.
Jim, for the 20% for the learning loss, is that meant for this, like in anticipation of next school year, or it could extend?
I think we're going to learn more about it.
Okay.
As I think about it, I think about summertime, and I don't know how much would be remaining going into the fall, depending on how robust your program is over the summer and where you are and what we decide to do.
Okay, thank you.
We'll definitely be sharing more of that information as we learn more. And I know Steve's already knee-deep in conversations with the directors and principals about what potential programming might be coming our way.
Yeah, I'll put that on the list too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This brings us to section 5, financial reports and motions. I'd like to take a consent of 5.1 through 5.13. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Benny. Thanks, Jess. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The next item, 5.1, is the motion to accept a donation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Jess. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, John. So this references, this is what I referenced in my opening remarks. There's a generous anonymous donation. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education of the Pelham Union Free School District does hereby accept the monetary donation of $3,000 to implement a universal classroom DBT program for Pelham Memorial High School and Pelham Middle School students, which is exceptional. I know, chatting with Julia when she first arrived and what her vision might be for like a Steps A kind of program or other programs that we'd bring to the secondary level. This is exciting.
Our health, I think I mentioned this before, our health teachers did get trained for it a few months ago. We haven't been able to get it off the ground this spring, but definitely we're planning on doing it for the fall so that we can start really more of the tier 1, skills for students to really learn on really self-regulation and things like that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? This brings us to section 6, which is policy monitoring and governance. 6.1 is policy 3420, non-discrimination and anti-harassment in the district, updated. This is the third reading.
Yeah, nothing has changed on this one since the second reading. So I would recommend, if nobody has anything, that we could vote, or we can move ahead with the vote.
Very good. So do I have a motion to approve policy 3420, non-discrimination and anti-harassment in the district?
So moved.
Thanks, Sue.
Second.
Thanks, Jess. Any questions or comments?
I would just say I'm looking, there's still a highlighted section that needs to be pulled out of
Oh,
there.
whoops, I'm so sorry.
But that's just a clerical
Okay.
change. That's
Not the verbiage, just a.
correct. Yeah, not any
Highlight.
substantive change. So we'll approve it.
Oh,
as-
I'm sorry. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
okay. We'll catch it. We'll just pull that out for next time, so
Yeah.
we'll be fine.
And that, just so that everybody's aware, the CRCOs are Dr. Garcia and Ms. Chung.
Yes.
Right. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next is 6.2, policy 5633, gender neutral single occupancy bathrooms. This is the first reading.
Right, so this is a new policy that we received, and as you said, it applies only to single occupancy bathrooms, which by definition are gender neutral. It's really a matter of the signage that you put on them, according to my discussion with Jim when we were walking through Hutchinson. So we're going to have gender neutral signage on those doors. We did talk about the last sentence. I think is important to know that All gender-neutral bathroom facilities will be clearly designated by the posting of signage either on or near the entry door of each facility. And that was mostly, we talked about here in the high school, that the only single-use bathrooms are like in the nurse's office, for instance. So there's going to be a sign in the hallway letting people know that there is a gender-neutral bathroom in that room so they can go in and use it. Otherwise, you might not know.
That makes sense. Any questions, comments? Thank you. Okay.
I actually have a question. We don't have any single service toilets other than the nursing office in the high school?
Jim probably could give best answer that.
He knows every toilet in the district.
I just
It's a real
found
Not an
skeleton.
area I have especially.
Now we're talking the subject from it now. So we do have it's the staff bathrooms. So in the annex, we certainly have a staff male and a staff female currently identified, which will have to be changed. And we also have, in some offices, you may have a single bathroom too, which would then be identified.
And how about in the new work in the high school? Are we doing anything there?
We have one bathroom, I believe, that's remaining, and the business office has one that's remaining. And I think there's one that's remaining in the administrative offices where Dr. Garcia is.
I think actually both are staying.
Both are staying
But
there.
nothing for students?
Well, those
There's
would be
one-
available for students.
There's one for
Only if we
students in
put
the
a
annex.
door, if we put a sign out in the corner so you can go into this office.
Correct.
I mean, I don't think that's really the right way to do that.
Right.
There is one available in the annex that's been generally a middle school bathroom for students
In where? Did you say?
in the annex.
Okay.
I know Ms. Sabia works with the students and makes sure that they're aware of where they can go. And
Yeah, I know, but still,
Yeah.
you know, if you have to ask permission to go into an office to use a bathroom, I don't think that's.
Well, but
It's
Don,
in
I
the
think
spirit
the
of it.
two that exist in the current business and superintendent's office now, with the proper signage, it wouldn't have to be going through an office. Because those aren't going to be offices anymore. They're going to be classroom spaces.
Okay.
I
And
mean,
the
at least that's
nurse's
my
office-
understanding of it, according to the original.
they're
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but yeah.
And from the conversation, I got the sense that the nurse's office is in no way off limits. You know, nobody's asking to go in there. Students go in there with some regularity.
Yeah, I think we should look at that. You know,
Yeah.
you want to put up barriers to people.
I've got an idea, and
Okay.
and it would probably be timely with the work being done this summer. That's probably manageable.
That would be great.
And in Hutchinson, we talked about it when we were in there. There are single-use bathrooms that are off the hallways, right? I believe
Yeah,
so.
I
yeah.
believe so. I mean, it's a trend to put
Yeah.
in single-service bathrooms. So anyway,
So if you're building, in theory, if you're building a new school, you may have some single.
yeah,
When we
yeah,
move
we
to
should be
that.
doing it.
And I'd have to check Hutchinson. It's too new. I don't know.
Okay. I feel like we were
All of that,
standing
yeah.
there in what I
It came
believe was
up
a
on our
hallway
tour.
with no walls
Yeah.
Mhm.
at the time. And we said, oh, there's a bathroom, it's single use.
Sounds good.
Jim, I know you had to, in your mind, to get a facilities meeting together sometime in the near future
Yes.
anyways. So that would be maybe just another item
Great.
to add to the discussion.
Okay. Section 7 is superintendent's personnel recommendations. I'd like to consent 7-1 through 7-4. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, John.
Second.
Thanks, Ben. Any questions, comments? Anything to add?
Wave of leave replacements as some teachers are leaving us for family reasons and others coming in. So that has never changed. It continues. But this year, there's just such a greater challenge finding people.
Right. A number of babies though this spring. I know a lot of my kids and other kids have come home very excited in the last couple of weeks
Yeah.
of finding out that their teachers are expecting. So news is circulating around.
And the administrators have done, a really great job trying to find good people.
Yeah.
But it has been a great challenge this year.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 8, People Personnel Services, 8.1 is Schedule D. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Eileen and Sue. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 9 is new business. Do we have any new business? Section 10, communications and comments from the public. We don't have any members of the public anymore. So section 11 is adjournment of the meeting. Eileen.
Madam President, would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Sue. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.